What's up, guys? Welcome back to Mikey Yourself. In this week's video, we're gonna refinish our marble top kitchen table, dining table, whatever you want to call it. This is a repeat of a video I did some time ago, but we're gonna do it a lot different and hopefully a lot faster. Let's take a look at the table and then we're gonna talk about how we're gonna approach this. All right, so here is our dinner table. And I'm trying to see if I can get y'all the best angle, but there is a ton of etching. That's like a smooth spot there. That's kind of weird. And that could have been done maybe with heat. But if you look at the reflection, I don't know if it's zooming in well, but you can see kind of all these like white spots or dulled spot. There you go, one right there. If you're looking at right there, I mean, you see those, right? So those are etching marks. And what happens is if you have a countertop table, a marble top table, you just need to come with grips the fact that you're going to get etching. It's going to happen. Somebody's going to spill water. Somebody's going to, you know, drop a droplet of wine or, you know, the condensation that comes off of your glass. Water's going to get onto it. It's a sensitive stone and it etches. So just come to grips with that. Know that you're going to have to resurface it every so often. Now, there's two ways to go about this. You can either do it yourself or you can hire somebody to come and do it. Okay, so let's talk about what you're going to need to get this job done. When I did this last time, I did it by hand, using sandpaper by hand, and it took me 2 days and about a week to recover. My hope here is to do it with a drill gun and knock it out in about 2 hours. Is that realistic? I don't know, but we're going to give it a try, that's for sure. Now, I learned some very important lessons outside of just the time it took for me to get that thing done, or to get it done last time, and that was just prep, right? And understanding that once you start kind of working on this stuff, it's gonna make a mess. So the best thing you do is put up some barriers. So what I mean by that is we're gonna use some plastic drop cloth, and I've got my chairs kind of in the corners here because I'm gonna tape it to create a barrier, because last time, even with my hand, actually no, I take that back, because I did use those discs originally, and that spun it, and it flung that slurry. So it's you'll see it when we get through the process here, but it flung it everywhere. Now, if you could take your table outside and refinish your table outside, that's optimal, man, because then you don't care, right? But if you're trying to do it, you know, in your house, because my table's too big to try to squeeze out the door, and it's too damn heavy to move it by myself. I've got to just make sure I clean my area, you know, or prep it, so that way when that slurry does get flung, that it doesn't make a mess. So that said, you're also going to want to make sure you wear, you know, essentially like a garage apron, or, you know, whatever. Don't wear your favorite shoes. Don't wear your favorite pants. Don't wear your favorite shirt, because it's going to get on you. That's just inevitable. So be prepared for that. So what we're going to be using is this 2 ml cloth, drop cloth. I've just picked this up at the Home Depot. It was dirt cheap. It's like 12 feet long. So I've got 2 of those. Hopefully that'll be enough to wrap around here. Just going to use some painter's tape to attach it to the to my chairs. Of course, depending on what your setup is, maybe you attach it to your wall, whatever, right? Just using painter's tape so that way it doesn't wreck anything. We're going to have to clean the table first, so give it a good wipe down. And what we're going to use is just some granite and stone daily clean and shine. So that, again, just trying to get that top contaminants off as best as I can. I've got my cordless drill gun. I've got 2 battery packs for this thing, and then I've got another drill gun where I've got another battery pack. So I'm hoping all 3 will be enough. Worst case scenario, because I'm going to rotate these out as they die, if they won't charge fast enough, then I may end up having to go to a plug-in drill gun, which I have that too, but let's see if we can avoid that. The other things we're going to use are these sanding discs. So these are discs that I got off of Amazon. I've used them for a bunch of projects, and they are wet dry sand discs. So you get a huge like range. I think it goes as low as like 400 or maybe 3, somewhere around there, and it goes up to about, I think, 2,000 grit, which we'll have to see what this looks like at 2,000. Last time I worked it all the way up to 7,000. So I'm not sure if 2,000 is going to be where I want it. We'll see. And then I've got myself this here, which is just an attachment. So this is what it looks like once it's attached. Now, I want to say this was maybe 10 bucks and you got 50 pieces. I also ordered another one. It's 100 pieces. And that's just because I use this stuff all the time in the garage, on the bikes, all kinds of other things, right? So definitely worthwhile. And you want to make sure you get your little deal to hook up there. So I'm going to go ahead, get things prepped, wipe the table down, and we'll talk about kind of how we're going to go through the process. Okay guys, so I've got the room prepped. I could have used another drop sheet, whatever. I've got about 3/4 of the area that I wanted to cover covered. So I'll just have to be very careful. Have lots of rags around, so that way you can clean up your mess as you go. When you go to lubricate the table, so when you're wet sanding, because that's what you're going to do, you're wet sanding this, you want to use distilled water. Don't use regular water, don't use mineral water, because that's actually what etches it, right? Is the chemical or whatever, not chemical, the minerals, whatever you want to call it, in the water, where distilled water doesn't have those properties. So you can safely use that not only to wipe your table down, or to do this, right? Now, etching goes pretty deep really quick. I can't tell you exactly. And just so we're clear, this is not my day job. I am not a professional tabletop finisher guy or whatever. So as you do this, understand it's at your own risk, just as I'm doing this at my own risk. So what we're gonna do is, I don't think I need to take it down too far. I'm gonna start with 400 grit. When I did the last video of this, I went really low because the stupid diamond disc things that I got, I think it was like at 50 grit. So I really goofed up the table. I had to start at a very low grit with the sandpaper to try to bring it back. And I don't want to make that mistake twice. So we're going to start with 400 grit and we're going to work our way up to the top. So we'll put that on. And like I said, the process is very simple. You're just going to wet your table with that distilled water. Not a bunch. You don't have to put a whole ton of it, right? And start to do your sanding. Now, I recommend just kind of working it in quadrants. That way it makes it easier, not like trying to, reach across your entire table or side to side or whatever. Just find a quadrant, do that with that grit, then go to the other quadrant, hit it with the grit, do it, the 4 times, of course, and then upgrade to the next grit, and kind of keep repeating that process as you go through, and that should get you to your end. So I'm gonna knock out this quadrant here, and I will bring you back. Well, actually, all right, so I just finished this quadrant with the 400 grit and wiped it off to get that slurry off of it. And I wanted to kind of check to see if I could find any etches that still were visible after the 400, because I don't know how deep they go. I just know they go deep. And I'm using a flashlight, but I don't know if, let's see if I can, yep, there, right here. You see that spot there? What I'm trying to figure out, and I think it is whether or not that's an etch mark or part of the table. But I'm seeing more than one. So I am gonna go one more grit down and then work my way back up to 400. Okay, so the magic grit was 240. That was the next one I had down in my batch. Actually, I might have some 300, but I ended up going with 240, and that seems to have knocked it down completely. So it is super dull. I cannot find that spot anymore, even with flashlight. But I mean, you can see the huge difference. Like, you can see reflection there, and then bam, you got nothing, right? And if you take a flashlight across the area I was looking, it's not there. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish the rest of the table with this 240, and then we're gonna work our way up. And so just so you know, the kind of the technique, I guess if you want to call it that I'm using essentially is going up and down in that pattern until I get to the edge, and then I go side to side until I get to the edge. All right, guys, so we're on the last quadrant now of that first pass, and as I was getting to the third quadrant, I found some etches that were a little bit deeper than the 240 grit would get rid of, so I ended up having to drop down to 120. I didn't want to do it just because it just means there's more, more passes that I'm gonna have to do. But again, it's important for you to inspect your work, do it in small sections. That way you don't do a ton of work and then find out it's no good and have to do it all over again. Do a small area, check it. Do the second small area, check it. Make sure the work's consistent. And then that way you know for sure that you're gonna have a good consistent job, a good consistent outcome as well, right? So I did want to show you, because one of the things that I've seen or read a lot in doing kind of research on other projects is they talk about overlap when you talk about sanding, when you talk about painting. There's a bunch of different things, right? So I wanted to show you kind of what does that look like? What are they talking about? So when you do this, so I'm gonna just throw down a little bit of water. What you're gonna wanna do is you make your pass, and then I'm only going about an inch, maybe half inch up, and I do my return pass. I go inch to inch, half inch to an inch up, pass there. And I just kind of repeat that process. And the reason I do that is because instead of trying to space this out, right? Because this is like a 5-inch disc, and you think, oh man, 2 passes, you could knock out 10 inches. The problem is it's round, first off, right? So you're never gonna get a good, consistent deal. And then what you wanna do is, again, make sure you have good, consistent sanding, right? And by doing this, you actually get multiple passes on areas to make sure it's nice and smooth, and you don't end up with blotches, right? Or lines. So that's what I talk about, or that's what I mean when I'm talking about overlap, and that's kind of essentially what they talk about when you're painting cars. They'll talk about it in percentages, like a 50% overlap or 70% overlap. Basically, that's, if I was overlapping, say this would be 100%. If I overlap by this much here, then that would be like 70%, 50%, and so on, right? So that's what they're talking about. I just want to run that through you just in case you didn't know, because I know I didn't. It took me a while before figuring it out. So that is the process, and that's essentially what I'm doing across. And I do it one direction and then the other direction, and that way I get a ton of coverage. The nice thing too also is, I don't know if it's just nature of the beast or whatever, but like when you do wood or plastic or whatever, it usually gunks up your sanding pad, your sanding disc, and the stone doesn't do it. I think it's the slurry, and it kind of sticks to the table. So that means you use less sandpaper. So that's a huge win too. All right, let me finish up this quadrant, and then we're gonna jump up to 240, and I'll bring you back once I'm done with the 240. You're not gonna probably see much of a difference just because it's gonna still be pretty dull. Okay, so here's what we're looking at after the 240 grit. So again, we started at 120. All right, this is 400. Just know, like, you're not gonna start seeing any kind of gloss until you get into about 1,000. So don't get discouraged if you're like moving your way up and you're like, dude, what? Like, how come it's not shiny yet? Okay, here is 600 grit completed. So you see a little bit of shiny, but that's just from me wiping it down. That's actually what it looks like. So we're jumping to 800. This is 800 grit. And we're off to 1,000. So now we should start to see a little bit of a shine starting to develop as we get to the 1,000, 1,500, and then definitely in the like 2,000, 5,000 range, we should actually see the gloss. All right, this is after 1,000 grit. So next up, 1,500. Okay, just completed the 1,500. We're gonna go next to the 2,000, and then we got one more, which is 5,000. All right, just wrapped up to 2,000. Now, I did run into some problems with those 2,000 grit sanding pads. They were wearing out really quick. I don't know, it was kind of weird. So I had some older ones that I used, but yeah, it was kind of weird. All right, just did the 3,000, and it is now exactly where I would expect it to be. So I don't know, maybe that 2,000 grit from that other set was just not that great. Okay, so we just finished the 5,000 grit, and it's drying up right now. I just wiped it down with some cleaner just to get all that slurry off of there. But I wanted to show you really quick. This is what was happening to the 2,000 grit sand, yeah, discs as well. As you see that blue, I think that's the blue from the backside kind of bleeding through. So I think it's just probably the quality of the sandpaper. This is some generic, very cheap sandpaper that I bought. So I think the better thing to have done would have been gone with like a 3M or somebody else who makes a little higher quality sandpaper. The lower grits seem to work fine. It's just these higher ones that, you know, they didn't do such a great job as far as being very durable. So I used a disc per quadrant just to make sure that I didn't, you know, lose the quality at the end, right? So trying to keep it consistent. But now that it's dried up, you can kind of see, or not, you can definitely see the reflection there that we're getting from the table. So at this point, I've got some simple green polish protected that I'll put on there, spray that on, give it a good wipe down, and call it a wrap. Okay, there you go. So it's looking good. I'm happy with the outcome. Now I will tell you, like, I mean, this is how many discs we went through. So a ton of discs. Don't shortchange yourself on the rags because they get dirty really quick, and you don't want to keep just smearing that stuff all over. So don't cheap out on it. I've got a bag of rags. You can get like 100 microfibers from Amazon for pretty cheap. All right, guys, so that's it. That's a wrap. Yeah, as you can see, it's not a hard process. It's just time consuming. It was a lot faster to do it with the drill gun. If you have a sander polisher, it is a better tool to use than a drill gun. I have one, but it's junk. It doesn't stay consistent, so that's why I was using drill guns instead of using an actual polisher sander. Maybe something I should invest in if I'm going to do this again, right? Just like I said, take time, put that plastic shielding up because it makes a mess. If you don't, you'll be thankful. Use as many towels as you can. Like don't keep reusing them because that slurry it saturates that towel, and then you just end up spreading it. So you want to make sure you just use some clean towels. And like I said, Amazon Basics, and there's a couple other brands. You can just buy a ton of freaking microfiber cloths right there off of Amazon. And use a higher quality sandpaper. So when I did it by hand, I was using 3M that I bought straight from, I think it was 3M, but I got it out of like Home Depot and some car accessory places. So it was better quality sandpaper. The stuff that I used, it was very disappointing when I got to the higher grits. So the lower grits seemed to work fine. The 120 and the 240, that stuff seemed to be pretty solid. But as soon as I broke 1,000, it wasn't performing very well. So if you are looking to buy those sanding discs, I would say go with a name brand. Don't go with the very cheap stuff that I got because it just didn't pay off, right? I ended up having to use most of them just to get through that table, and even then it didn't perform as well. So lesson learned. Other than that, like I said, take your time, do it. Understand you're not going to get the showroom finish like if it was brand new, but you're going to make it look nice again. You're not going to see those etch marks anymore, which is kind of the annoying point, is just seeing those etch marks. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something. If you're a professional in the field watching this video, throw a comment. Tell me what I could do better. Any advice? I got feedback on my original video from people who actually do this for a living. Great information. So I'm always open, and the people watching this video, they need as much help as I do. So whatever feedback you can provide would be much appreciated. So until my next video does post, I hope to see you in the win.